Hello, I'm Alex from Annabest Recaps, and I'd love to tell you a story. A young man finds himself trapped in a dull gray routine, working day in and day out, where each miserable day is an exact copy of the last. And I've got to admit, the anime already hooked me here because that felt a little too real. Somehow, he thought he should feel comfortable with so much stability, but the truth is, he longed for something different. One night, after coming home from work and turning on the TV, he's suddenly pulled inside the screen and comes face to face with the figure on the broadcast. This man introduces himself as the supervisor of the solar system. The worker, startled, asks if that makes him some kind of alien, but the stranger explains that it's closer to a divinity, while also being something like a middle manager of the universe. As they talk, the strange being starts to vent, mentioning that no matter what he does with the planet called Medeus, things never seem to go well. Civilizations collapse again and again, and that's why he had to intervene. He explains that a single drop falling on Medeus can ripple outward and grow strong enough to change the entire world. And well, the supervisor of the solar system wants this ordinary Japanese worker to be that drop. On top of that, he makes it crystal clear, the poor man is already dead. In other words, if he refuses, his soul will simply vanish forever. But if he chooses to go to Medeus, he won't be going empty-handed. The supervisor promises to send him with any gifts he desires, and these gifts are what they call special abilities. Excited by the chance, the worker, looking for a few days of glory, asks the sovereign for some pleasant female companions, and the divinity assures him he'll encounter them in the new world. Beyond that, his recognition abilities will be enhanced, allowing him to identify materials that can be sold for money, and to store them, he'll get a convenient pouch. To communicate, he'll automatically understand the local language, and to top it all off, he'll receive a variety of useful resistances. Suddenly, our protagonist's body begins to fade away piece by piece, terrifying him. The supervisor says it's time to leave. Looking over the list of gifts he'd given, he realizes he may have added too much, but it's already too late. And just like that, the former office worker is now sent to a fantasy world unlike anything he has ever known. At that moment, he opens his eyes for the first time in this universe and is stunned by the breathtaking scenery spread before his blue eyes. But amidst all this beauty, he asks himself, what should I do now? He decides the first step is to look for people in this strange land. After some walking, he's fortunate enough to spot a village in the distance. He doubts he'll be able to buy food without money, but then remembers he was given recognition abilities, meaning if he can gather materials, he might be able to sell them for some cash. Eager to test it out, he picks up a stick from the ground to use as a wand and shouts, "Activate recognition magic!" But obviously nothing happens, leaving him red-faced in embarrassment, trying to figure things out. He writes the word search in the dirt, and when he repeats it aloud, glowing symbols appear, pointing out materials scattered around him. With that, he finally realizes he must say the correct command word. Hoping to analyze things more deeply, he experiments with other words like check, investigate, and scan. To his surprise, one attempt works. A virtual panel opens describing the detailed traits of a flower before him. Thrilled, he begins collecting items all around. However, he's disappointed that most are low-ranked. To make matters worse, he picks up what turns out to be a lump of dung ranked at sea level, realizing only after holding it in his hand that it was feces. But as bad as that was, the event still teaches him something valuable. Materials that can be traded show up with special icons, and he can track them using his recognition magic. With that in mind, he gathers a good amount of materials and hurries toward the village, anxious to find out how much they're worth before night falls. At the gate, he finds a guard who looks half asleep. The guard asks if he's a swordsman, but our protagonist says he's just a traveler named Takeru, here to sell some materials. The guard then introduces himself as Marlowe, a patrolman of Tomi Village, and remarks that it's rare to meet someone skilled in gathering. They don't have a dedicated material shop there, but they do have a general store. With that, the gate opens, and Takeru enters the village drawing curious stares from the villagers along the way. Reaching the store, he asks the shopkeeper if he'd be willing to buy the dung he had found in the forest. The merchant inspects it and identifies it as hammer anteater excrement, praised for its unique shape, strength, and color. For that material, he offers 5 silver coins. Unsure of the value, Takeru asks what a night at the inn costs. For comparison, the merchant explains it's 500 raves, and 1 silver coin is worth 1,000 raves. Doing the math, our protagonist figures that if a night at the inn is about 5,000 yen, then this lump of waste is worth 50,000 yen. He's baffled that the man wants to buy such a thing at such a high price, and is even more bewildered watching the merchant rub the item against his cheek like a stuffed toy. The merchant then eagerly asks to see what else the traveler has brought, and to his astonishment, there are even rarer items inside Takeru's pouch. Curious, he asks why the young man has come all the way to such a remote place. Takeru explains that he's been traveling, collecting materials wherever he goes. In that moment, the merchant doesn't waste the opportunity and offers the outsider a job to collect mithril ore from the eastern mountain. Since Takeru shows interest and asks if there's some kind of map to help him out, the merchant first offers 360,000 raves for the materials he brought, which, according to the boy's calculations, amounts to 3.6 million yen. It's an absurd sum of money, but not everything is smooth sailing in this line of work, and Takeru quickly realizes that when the merchant reveals that monsters roam the eastern mountain. After this unusual encounter, the traveler finally manages to get a room to rest, but all he can think about is how much he wants a good bath before bed. In the middle of that, an inn worker walks into the room without permission, though she's carrying a basin of hot water that costs 30 raves per use for customers to wash themselves. Our protagonist scratches his head and asks if they don't have an actual bathtub, but the girl explains that only nobles have access to something like that. In other words, either he uses the basin, or he could try to find a mage to clean him with magic, though unfortunately there aren't any in Tomi Village. Not in the mood for more chit-chat, Takeru hands over the 30 raves along with a little tip, which makes the girl light up with happiness. Alone again, he keeps thinking about that whole idea of using magic to clean the body, and decides to try and find a word that might work as a spell. After a brief reflection, the man shouts the word clean, and after that, a skill activates, scrubbing his body spotless. The cry of surprise and delight echoes down the hallway loud enough for the worker to hear, but Takeru doesn't care. He's so shiny and refreshed that he can't help but admiring himself, though deep down, he still wishes he could have had the chance to just laze around in a bathtub. The next day, Takeru returns to the forest around Tomi, and he feels like he's finally getting the hang of this new job of collecting materials to sell. While working, he comes across a sword icon for the first time and jumps in shock when he realizes it marks the remains of a fallen warrior, his equipment still lying there. The weapons themselves don't seem that impressive, just low rank, but still, for his own peace of mind, the boy takes the time to give the deceased a proper burial, digging a grave, offering a prayer, and planting the sword into the earth as a tombstone. In the late afternoon, our protagonist draws a circle on the ground around himself and recites the word barrier, causing a magical shield to activate surrounding him before fading into invisibility. Feeling secure, he tosses into a boiling pot the spices he bought in the village, along with wild vegetables from the forest, and tops it off with the main ingredient, meat. Once the stew is ready, he tastes the broth and realizes this strange new life might just be the best thing that's ever happened to him. And I have to say, so far I'm loving the vibe of this anime. When morning comes, Takeru sets off for the Forest of White Trees, also known as the Forest of the Ancient Dragons. The eastern mountain region is the likely location of the mithril requested by the shopkeeper, so he casts an orb of light to guide him through the dark woods. But to his disappointment, there was no sign of ore, though at least there were no signs of monsters either, just feeling that the place seemed dead, maybe because of the stench he was giving off. Whatever the case, Takeru decides to hurry out of the forest and head for the mountain, but haste makes waste. In his rush, he doesn't realize he's charging straight toward a cliff, and with rotten luck, he plummets into a giant gorge. Desperate, he shouts the word glide, and by sheer fortune manages to trigger a spell that slows his fall into a gentle descent. At the very least, despite the fright, the boy stumbles upon several veins of silver ore in the hidden valley. With that, he quickly readies his pickaxe to collect the resource. But silver isn't what the merchant asked for. He wanted mithril. So the collector uses his search magic once again, this time picking up a faint signal deeper inside the cavern. Just then, a rumbling from the earth suggests an earthquake is about to hit, and with no other options, the man grabs what he can and prepares to get out fast. Mixing the spells Ignite and Eruption, he creates what's practically a bomb, blasting the rock where the ore's symbol appeared. As a result, he finds the mithril vein, ranked A+. However, the tremors press him to leave at once, but now that he's found what he came for, Takeru can't resist going even deeper in search of a greater source. And what seemed like audacity turned out to be a huge success. At the back of the cave, he discovers a spring of crystal clear water, and upon scanning it, he realizes it's an SS rank material. In other words, his greatest find yet. Then it hits him. The water is infused with the mana of an ancient dragon. This could mean a creature like that once lived here, and his theory couldn't be more right, because at that very moment, a gigantic dragon emerges from the site. To the monster's surprise, the human simply withstands its intimidation and even offers a humble apology for barging into its home uninvited, while our protagonist reflects that the job market has so thoroughly killed his soul that he's already used to bowing to every kind of person imaginable. The dragon thinks the big shot before him is interesting to say the least, and asks who he is. Our protagonist introduces himself as Takaru, a simple human, which the dragon obviously doesn't believe. For him, there's no way Takaru is just a human, especially since the magical power radiating from him rivals that of the ancient dragon itself. By the way, the monster reveals his name. He's called Voldius. Unbothered by the thought of death and even less concerned about making friends, Takaru asks if he can call the creature Vol-san, and to his surprise, the request is granted. Since the ice has been broken, Voldius makes a request, mentioning that with the pure power of a human, perhaps the dragon might finally revive his child, whose egg has lain dormant thanks to the stagnant mana in this cavern. He mentions that if Takaru agrees to help, he'll be rewarded with a good handful of mithril. When the human agrees, Voldius lifts a massive black egg from the depths of the water and explains that he must channel his magic into it, the same way he created the orb of light that guided him there. Wondering how to warm the egg, Takaru whispers the word heat, and at once warmth surges into the shell, but the reaction is far more disturbing than expected, as it feels like the egg is pulling his very skin inward, consuming him. As the ancient dragon's laughter echoes across the cavern, Takaru fears he's been tricked, wondering if his brief adventure in this new world was really going to end in such a pitiful way, just when he had started to feel so hopeful about the future. To make the trip even crazier, he then feels his consciousness cast into an astral sea where his body is sinking in this near-death experience. From the void, a strange and enigmatic figure appears, scolding him for recklessly throwing himself into such dangerous situations. According to the being, any normal person would have fainted or fled for their life when facing a dragon, but he behaves so differently that it seems he's already begun rewriting the very laws of this world. The entity admits it's been tweaking this world for hundreds of thousands of years, always with small, subtle changes. However, Takaru arrived like a storm, spreading waves everywhere, and according to it, that's an annoyance impossible to ignore. Because of this, it decides to tone down some of the special abilities the boy had received from that kid, in other words, the supervisor of the solar system. With that, Takaru awakens to the sound of a baby. He finds himself in an endless void, and soon, along with the cries of the newborn, comes the voice of Voldius, the ancient dragon. Takaru conjures another orb of light, illuminating the space to reveal the dragon's child, finally hatched. As a gesture of thanks, Voldius allows him to name the hatchling. After a moment of thought, Takaru decides on B, short for black, since the little creature's scales are jet black. Ironically, Voldius mishears it as B the Black all strung together, and the name sticks that way. What's more, Voldius declares that his child must explore the vast world at Takaru's side, a responsibility the boy finds too heavy, not to mention sudden. Still, as the dragon had said earlier, Takaru is even stronger than him, so he can rest easy knowing his son is in good hands. Before disappearing back into the depths, the monster casts a mysterious spell toward Takaru's back, then plunges once more into the vast lake. And now, entrusted with the newborn, Takaru invites B to join him on a journey to gather materials. But before they set off, he realizes the hatchling stinks way too much, and with a grimace, he uses the clean skill on him. After all, their trip could at least be a bit more fragrant and pleasant that way.
The scene shifts, and we then see that they are leaving the cave, and Takaru can see the pure joy in B's eyes as he beholds the outside world for the very first time in his life. However, the little dragon's happiness is short-lived, because besides it being too late to walk through the forest, the hunger our protagonist was feeling was already making his stomach cave in. So because of that, he decides to camp right there so they can rest before continuing. Before organizing everything, Takaru opens his bag and takes a cup of elemental water, explaining to us that Voldius, the ancient dragon, connected his backpack to the underground lake, which means the human now has an infinite source of that water, essential for B's growth and something Takaru himself can also drink. And then the night truly set in, and with that, he spreads his magic stones on the ground to activate the shield that will protect them until morning. According to the encyclopedia he bought, these stones are considered precious for their heating effect. To his surprise, Takaru discovers he's capable of creating this type of item easily and uses one of his creations to light a campfire. With the fire crackling, the collector roasts some meat and prepares a stew for himself, but it was impossible for him not to notice that B was simply mesmerized by the food from how delicious it looked. Even though he's afraid the little one might get a stomachache, Takaru lets him eat a bit, on the condition that he waits for it to cool down. However, B's greed makes him ignore the warning, causing him to down the bowl of stew in one go, feeling the burning heat invade his throat. Patiently, Takaru blows on another bowl of stew until it cools and gives it to his partner, who devours it again without wasting a second. After eating until he almost burst, the little dragon looks completely satisfied. Takaru jokes, saying it would be boring if only he could eat, and that at least now B can share his meals. Setting that aside, he asks if the little dragon feels lonely away from his parents, but B hugs him, making it clear that as long as they're together, everything will be fine. Happy, Takaru checks the little dragon's skills and sees that he's a rank B with incredible talent. Still, he's like a child, so Takaru advises him not to do anything reckless. Thinking to himself, he remembers that before coming to this world, he had asked that entity for adorable companionship. However, he's not sure if this was exactly what the deity had in mind, but somehow he feels that that weird manager of the universe did it on purpose. Be that as it may, our protagonist continues his journey alongside the winged monster, who watches from above as the human climbs a cliff. Upon reaching the top, Takaru realizes, surprised, that he's back in the same forest as before, and as if by magic, it no longer seems so scary. Once inside, he focuses on finding rank C resources and activates his search ability, getting excited when he discovers several different herbs. The gathering, however, is interrupted when B suddenly appears. In panic, terrified by something, Takaru expands the range of his search and detects several aggressive monsters approaching. He thought his scent kept them away, but it seems the effect is worn off. Even so, the collector knows he's not an easy opponent and prepares for battle confident in his powers. And indeed, a rock hawk appears, a gigantic rank C creature. Honestly, after meeting Voldius, the ancient dragon, that roided-out hawk more looks like a barnyard chicken. And let's be honest, fried chicken for lunch wouldn't be a bad idea. Analyzing the creature, Takaru discovers its meat is rich, sweet, and fatty. Not missing the chance, he begins his attack. First, he raises a magic shield and then creates ice needles that pierce the creature's skin and finish it off instantly. As expected, that wasn't the only enemy. Without delay, 6 serpent wolves of rank C appear and surround their prey. Takaru boosts his speed with the quickness skill and uses reduction to make his body lighter. After dodging one of the wolves' lunges with a massive jump, the boy activates hardening on his arms and legs and lands with a powerful kick to one of their necks. Next, he lands a punch on another's snout, sending it flying into a third. The 4th wolf takes a kick to the jaw, and the last 2 get powerful slaps right across their faces, ending the fight. With the job done, the collector does what he does best: collect. After taking the meat of the animals, he notices there are still several monsters roaming the area, and fears he might never make it out of that forest. Afraid his partner might kick the bucket, B starts pulling him upward with all his might. He manages to lift the human body, but Takaru is too heavy, so he helps by reducing his weight again. The funny part is that the force the dragon was using suddenly launches them high into the air, and B completely loses control of the flight. He ends up dropping his friend from a great height, and Takaru plummets, saved by a miracle as his fall is cushioned by the trees. B, relieved, runs over and starts licking his friend's face with his stinky tongue. Takero complains about the manure smell, but the trauma leaves him unable to move. To make matters worse, Bee managed to get them out of the forest, but he brought them right back to the exact same place where they had camped. Our protagonist almost starts to complain, but since the little dragon only did it to save him, he lets it go. He just reminds the flying lizard that he's a human, not a doll. But Bee doesn't understand a thing, so he gives up and just holds on to the certainty that his friend will always be there for him. The two continue their journey towards Tomi village. Bee seems intrigued by the branch his partner is carrying, and Chikaro explains that it's a dormant branch of Yggdrasil. Hearing this, without asking for permission, Bee blows mana into the branch and awakens it, turning it into a staff. Chikaro isn't too happy with the transformation, as he'd hate to be mistaken for a mage, but since there's nothing he can do, so be it. Suddenly, the two hear a brutal roar coming from the depths of the forest, and Bee immediately clings to Chikaro. While the human worries about the terror that sound carried, Bee, in a surge of courage, flies toward the noise, forcing his companion to run after him. On the way, the dragon finds an injured elf leaning against a tree. Chikaro approaches and asks if she was attacked by the monster, but my dears, it turns out the beast was her. That grotesque roar was nothing more than her stomach rumbling after 3 days without eating. Almost at her limit, the elf asks for a sip of water, and Chikaro quenches her thirst, but not her hunger, and with that, the elf's stomach thunders once more. At that moment, he remembers the innkeeper gave him a special lunch, and our protagonist, in his kindness, hands the lunchbox to the starving woman, who devours it without the slightest ceremony. Maybe it was the hunger, but upon tasting that food, the woman felt as if she were ascending to heaven. Changing the subject, a curious Chikaro asks why she was without food. Embarrassed, she said she was in a hurry. Chikaro retorts that even people in a hurry usually take food with them. Annoyed and cornered, the elf releases a terrible smell, forcing the poor human to cover his nose. He swore elves smelled like a spring breeze, but this one smelled like fertilizer. Smelling her own clothes, the woman argues that it's not her fault she's been camping for 3 days, and embarrassed, she thanks him and decides to leave, muttering that it's not polite to say people smell like fertilizer. After parting ways with the elf, whom he mentions as being disappointing, Chikaro collects a few more materials, and fortunately, as he leaves the forest, he comes across a carriage. The driver, a friendly man, offers him a ride, and Chikaro joins the man's lovely family. He apologizes for taking up so much space in the carriage. However, the driver and his wife explain that the motto of Tomi Village is to help one another. So I hope that just like them, you'll also help out with a like and some hype to help my humble channel prosper, just as I'm trying to help you by telling the best stories possible. A fair trade, right? Grateful for the help, Chikaro reflects that the children must be very brave to travel like this, since the road is dangerous. Speaking of which, he asks what they would do if he turned out to be a bandit. The little boy replies that they would know because a magic item would ring a bell. Chikaro finally introduces himself, and the family does as well. The mother is named Eliza, the girl Yunnan, the boy Kain, and the father is named Poran. Just then, little Bee, who had been squirming inside his clothes, decides to appear. Chikaro introduces him saying he's a black dragon whelp, but hides the fact that the little creature is the son of an ancient dragon. Even so, Eliza, the mother, knows that those creatures are extremely rare, which leaves her, at the very least, suspicious. Hours later, as night falls, Chikaro sets out his magic alert stones and assures them that Bee would also warn them of any danger. Eliza offers to cook, but as a thank you, Chikaro takes on the responsibility himself. Impressing everyone, he pulls ingredients from his bag and quickly prepares a special meat salad. Eliza and the children love the meal, but Poran, the father, seems quiet. Worried, Chikaro asks if he overdid the seasoning, but the truth is, Poran liked it so much he couldn't hold back his tears. He and his family had been eating only dried meat every day, and there was no greater joy for him than seeing his children so happy with such a meal. According to the man, Chikaro was a mage of cooking. After dinner, everyone gathered to sing, and that unique moment of unity and joy made Chikaro reflect deeply. While he was on Earth, living his ordinary life, he had never realized that compared to eating alone in silence, nights like this weren't bad at all, and that for the first time since arriving in this new world, he feels he was able to laugh with deep sincerity. When he finally lies down to sleep, Chikaro gently pats Bee's head. Feeling complete, the young man looks up at the starry sky and smiles.
As the sun rises, Poran is already at work, cleaning the reins and the carriage. While the children continue to sleep peacefully with our dear bee nestled between them, Takaru is also up, sitting on the ground and passing the time as he polishes his shears until they shine. Eliza also emerges from the carriage and greets Takaru, saying that anyone who takes good care of their tools becomes a good adventurer. Takaru realizes that lately he has been greatly enjoying his life, and that perhaps he is naturally good at this. Soon, they prepare to continue their journey, but this time, Takaru asks to take the reins for a while, and Poran gladly agrees. As the unicorn seems to be a very intelligent creature, it responds to Takaru's every command. Bee also wakes up and immediately flies over to his friend. After a few more hours of a peaceful journey, they finally catch the first glimpse of Tomi Village and arrive at the main gate. Takaru gets off there, while Poran and his family thank him for the wonderful time they spent together. The guard seems to know Poran, commenting that he always brings the spring with him. Takaru, curious, asks what Poran does, and the guard explains that he and his family are weavers who travel following the warmer regions. So, when Poran arrives in the village, it means that spring and summer are near. The guard also mentions that game has been scarce lately, which makes Takaru understand why Poran was so happy with the food. A little later, he goes to meet the shopkeeper who gave him the quest, and shows him all the spoils he gathered. The shopkeeper spends a good amount of time analyzing the items, but seems particularly interested in one of the rocks. He turns to Takaru asking where he found it, as it wasn't just mithril ore, but magical mithril ore. Our protagonist has no idea what that means, but the shopkeeper claims that it's the stuff of legends. This shakes Takaru, who asks if it's expensive, to which the shopkeeper tries to make him understand the scale of the find, saying that the stone contains an immense amount of concentrated mana, and that just 2 or 3 of them would be enough to replace all the magic stones in the kingdom. Shocked, but not wanting to reveal his special skill, Takaru claims he just found it by chance. The shopkeeper obviously doesn't buy the story, saying that even if it was by chance, he definitely has a lot of skill and luck, also mentioning that his talents are being wasted there, and that he should go to the next big city, known as Belkheim. There, he will find people with the funds to buy items like that and will also learn more about the world. That night, Takaru relaxes in his room and researches more about guilds, realizing that being an adventurer can be very beneficial. He decides that his next step will be to leave for Belkheim and join a guild, but for now, he'll stay in Tomi for a while. A few days pass, during which he offered the meat of the beast he killed to be cooked for the entire village, and since there was a huge shortage of game, everyone loved the taste. Soon, he prepares to leave, and the kind lady from the inn gives him a bunch of seasonings and homemade meals for the long journey of almost a month to Belkheim, mentioning that he should come back if he ever feels homesick. Takaru is grateful. Back in his room, he puts Bee to sleep, and thinking about how kind the village has been to him, decides he should give something in return. He gets up and, looking at the lantern and the magical mithril stone, gets an idea. Thinking of the guard who stands watch day and night, he uses his creativity and the stone's mana to fuse it with the lantern, creating a new magical item. The next morning, as he was ready to leave, the entire village came to see him off. He realizes that this small place has become his true home, to which he will definitely return. He then offers the magical item he created, explaining to the guard that it can cast a barrier that will protect them from monsters. The village is immensely grateful, but the shopkeeper examines the item and asks if he used the magical mithril stone. Before he can protest and tell Takaru to take the stone with him, our protagonist just says that he needs neither that stone nor any payment, as nothing strengthens his journey more than the likes and hype from the viewers of this wonderful recap. He also takes the opportunity to mention that the narrator, Alex, is very happy with the support of his subscribed friends, so please continue to show your support by leaving a like and some hype, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell. At that, Takaru runs off, telling the shopkeeper to keep it for the village. The scene shifts, and as Takaru and Bee are traveling, he mentions the tranquility they're experiencing. However, he should have kept his mouth shut, because as soon as he mentioned it, a giant crab-like creature appeared before him. At first, Takaru is even startled, but on checking its stats, he realizes that it's a rank C monster and that its meat is edible. His mouth starts to water, and he tells Bee that crab meat is delicious. This is what we call an opportunity. He prepares for the fight, but before he can attack, Bee unleashes his subsonic breath and immediately knocks it down. However, before they could celebrate, 2 more crabs appear. He formulates a plan, thinking the crabs can only move sideways, But to his horror, the creatures ran straight at him, something that even the future could not have predicted. With no time to dodge, he wonders if his journey ends there, but B grabs him by the collar and lifts him into the air, while the two crabs collided violently with each other. The first one even got back up, but Takaru, now prepared, hits it with his staff, finishing the monster instantly.
That night, they prepare for a feast. Takeru uses his enchantments to reinforce his hand, cutting the crab legs and putting them in a pot to create a stew. Once the meat is cooked, they crack open the shell and take their first bite of crab in this new world, loving the flavor. After a journey that fortunately didn't take a month, he finally arrives at the city of Belkheim, a huge protected structure surrounded on one side by water. He gets in line with other peasants, but realizing he might stand out, uses his magic to make his magic bag look normal and tells B to hide. He is then called by immigration, and an agent checks his luggage and ID, using a basic magic scan to check for a criminal record. Takeru is interested to know how his stats appear to others, but realizes they must look normal as the god ensured he wouldn't stand out. The agent says he's all clear, but that he possesses a dragon's blessing, which is confusing them. Takeru decides to reveal the truth and shows B, who immediately charms everyone with his cuteness. The agent just tells him to put a tag on the dragon, and Takeru uses a bracelet he had, completing his immigration. Upon entering, he is amazed by the bustling city, with people of all races walking together. He walks around in awe of everything he sees until he spots the guild hall in the distance. Then he goes straight there and enters a magnificent place filled with all kinds of warriors. Suddenly, he is approached by Ariana, a receptionist with bunny ears, who welcomes him and asks if he would like to register. Takeru agrees and follows her to the counter to fill out his personal information. As he does so, Ariana notices he's a material gatherer and asks if he has any combat experience. He replies that he doesn't have much, but that he fought a weird bird, some serpent wolves, and a bunch of giant crabs. Ariana, confused, asks for some proof, and he, without a second thought, shoves his hand into his bag and pulls out a giant crab, plopping it onto the table, which obviously breaks under the weight. The receptionist gets scared and runs off, while people in the guild gather to see what happened. A beastman uses his special skill to check Takeru and tells Ariana that he doesn't seem dangerous. The beastman explains that his skill allows him to see people's intentions. Takeru, relieved, hears the beastman ask if he's going to sell the crab. He says no, that he's carrying it to eat, which shocks everyone as it seems people in this world don't eat crabs. With that, the beastman tells Ariana to finish the registration. He asks Takeru if he has any partners, and he replies that his only partner is his dragon B, and guess what? Yes, this shocks everyone once again. After all, a gatherer is already a rare class. A gatherer having a super rare beast like a dragon is almost impossible. Takeru immediately starts getting all the attention, with several guilds trying to recruit him. Ariana decides to take him to a private room to finish the registration. After finishing all the bureaucracy and with his registration finalized, Ariana gives him a copper bracelet, mentioning that he will start at rank F like all new adventurers, and wishes him good luck on his new adventure. Our protagonist, seeing that his bracelet matches his little friend B's bracelet, is simply happy, and the two celebrate this new step in their journey.
The scene changes, and we see that Takeru has reported back to the guild about the deceased adventurer he found in one of the previous episodes. Turns out he discovered the guy's name was Belluria Fend, and he'd been taking on countless jobs to pay for his father's medicine. With this info, our protagonist decided to do the right thing, report the news to the family, and return Belluria's belongings to his loved ones. And as you'd expect, Belluria's family is devastated, especially since they had warned him not to take such risks. As they're talking, Takeru notices the guy's dad is still really sick, and feeling awful about their loss, he gets it in his head that he has to do something to help. After that, he heads to the guild to sell a bunch of herbs, and the clerk is blown away by how massive the mushrooms and leaves he brought in are.
Just then, Ariana pops around the corner looking specifically for Takeru. It seems our protagonist has become the new town celebrity because a whole bunch of jobs have been posted personally requesting him. Takeru is super happy to know that people like his work, but he just doesn't have time to handle all of it, so he tells her he'll just take a few for now.
Later, Takeru decides to unwind and hits up the bathhouse. But just a few moments later, a certain guy named Clay, the rank A adventurer, shows up. Takeru was surprised to see him there since it's not the guy's usual time, but Clay just says it looks like it's going to rain and he wanted to get a quick bath in. And since Takeru is right there, Clay takes the chance to ask if he knows how to use healing magic. Apparently there are rumors going around that he healed a sick man in the slums for free. And with a quick flashback, we find out the man in question is none other than Belluria's father. Takeru admits it's true, and Clay is floored since most healers charge an insane fee for that. Now that Takeru thinks about it, he gets a little worried that the healers who do charge money might get mad at him for undercutting the market. The fact that this is Takeru's only concern makes Clay laugh out loud. He encourages Takeru to take the rank up assessment test, but our protagonist says he's not interested because he's perfectly happy with how things are. Clay realizes Takeru is a chill guy, but he warns him that acting like that will eventually attract unwanted attention, so as he leaves, he encourages Takeru to learn a little more about how the world works. Later on, Takeru delivers another batch of herbs to the guild. The clerk thanks him for the hard work, but he really wishes Takeru would rank up, since it'd be easy for him. And our protagonist once again says he's happy where he is and has no intention of advancing beyond F rank. At that exact moment, all hell breaks loose in the guild. A horde of goblins has been spotted near the city. The guildmaster immediately issues an order for all D-rank and higher adventurers to prepare for battle. He then asks the receptionist if there are any A-rank adventurers available, but just our luck, most of them are already on missions. The only A-ranker left is Clay. The guildmaster is relieved they'll at least have the support of the Honorable Dragon King, so he tells Muesli to go inform Clay of the situation immediately. Takeru sees all this going down, and since he's just an F rank, he literally couldn't care less about helping and is already planning his escape. However, the guildmaster is well aware of Takeru's little game, so he points right at Takeru and informs him that he's coming on the mission too, whether he likes it or not. A while later, once all the adventurers are gathered, the guildmaster explains the plan. The front line is on the Stavlaw Plains, and the goblins will probably head straight for Belkheim. The mission is to intercept those guys at the Zalwest River. Everyone seems hyped to defend the city, except for Takeru, who really doesn't want to be there. Just then, two adventurers next to him notice that Takeru was F rank and start questioning why a weakling like him is on a high-level mission. That's when the guildmaster comes over and explains that while he technically can't force an F rank to fight, he can ask Takeru to gather valuable drops on the battlefield, especially since the entire guild staff won't stop singing Takeru's praises. At this point, Muesli comes over and apologizes to Takeru, promising to do her best to support him, since she knows a bit of healing magic and will be helping as a medic. Takeru gets why she was asked to come, but seeing how excited she is for a deadly battle, he gets this gut feeling that something is about to go horribly, horribly wrong. Speaking of being forced to do something, the guildmaster is forcing Takeru to go fight, and you guys kind of force me to make more videos when you smash that like button and show the hype to support the channel. So if you want Takeru and me to keep working, you know what to do, right? It's a fair trade, so help me out. A bit later, Takeru and Muesli arrive at the rearguard outpost, and the second they get there, Muesli gets spooked by a bird and starts clinging to Takeru's arm, terrified.
He asks her to calm down, explaining they're far away from the real fight, and that it's okay to be scared. She just needs to do her best. Takeru's speech cheers her up, and she promises to do just that before running off into one of the tents. A moment later, Clay shows up, finding it hilarious that Takeru was just giving a speech about fighting when he himself was trying so hard to dodge the mission. Takeru sees the irony, but just says he doesn't like getting into trouble for no reason. Speaking of which, he finds it odd that Clay is in the rear guard, and the swordsman admits some old scars are acting up. Takeru remembers seeing those scars on Clay's back at the bathhouse. Clay tenses up, expecting Takeru to mock him, since scars on the back are a warrior's shame. It means you were wounded while running away. But Takeru totally breaks his expectation, saying he sees nothing shameful about it. It's obvious Clay got those scars protecting someone, and the fact he survived is something to be proud of. At that exact moment, they both hear the rumble of hundreds of footsteps approaching. Clay realizes the front line has been breached and the enemy is coming. Even in pain, Clay grabs a spear and says he'll intercept the monsters, vowing to protect Takeru even if his body breaks. Takeru tries to say he really doesn't need that, but the guy's already gone. He then looks at the tent and sees Murazili trying her best to heal a wounded soldier, even while shaking in fear. This makes Takeru feel like a piece of trash for trying to take the easy way out. Right then and there, he decides he'll do whatever it takes to make sure everyone gets home safe. With that, he casts a barrier around the outpost to protect Murazili and the other healers, and then heads straight for the front lines. Up at the front, the adventurers are fighting for their lives, but it's clear they're about to be overrun. Suddenly, Takeri comes running onto the battlefield and throws a punch so hard it sends a goblin flying, splattering it against a rock pillar. Takeru is kinda weirded out by fighting humanoid monsters, but with no time to think about the ethics of it, he just tells Bee to clean up the area. Bee flies up and unleashes his lightning magic, frying all the goblins in the area at once. With everyone safe, Takeru asks what the hell happened. An adventurer explains their formation was holding until a high-level goblin sergeant showed up and wrecked everything. Clay appeared just in time to save them and went after the boss, but they got separated in the chaos and nobody knows if Clay is okay. Takeru goes looking for him, and near the forest we see Clay fighting for his life surrounded by goblins. He manages to take a few down, but his scars are hurting too much and the pain brings him to his knees. Just as the goblins are about to stab him from behind, Takeru arrives and electrocutes the monsters. Clay is shocked and tells Takeru to run, but Takeru reminds him that he's the one who's all busted up. Just then, the goblin sergeant appears and lunges at them. Clay, even in agonizing pain, takes a battle stance and says he'll hold off the monster long enough for Takeru to escape, because he refuses to let a friend die. Takeru is moved by the guy's resolve, and so he asks if those scars on his back have any sentimental value. Clay thinks it's a bizarre question to ask mid-battle, but says they only remind him of his failures and that he hates them. Takeru basically takes this as a go ahead and erase them. Before Clay can even react, Takeru reaches into his bag and splashes Voldisa's magic water on the swordsman, then casts a full-on healing spell. But it has some side effects. Besides healing the scars, the magic forces Clay to evolve, turning him all black and giving him an absurd amount of power. Takeru has no idea what just happened, and neither does Clay, but the pain is gone and he feels stronger than ever. He decides to test out his new toy and charges the goblin sergeant. In a matter of seconds, he destroys the boss without even breaking a sweat. Later that night, Clay, now back to normal, goes to Takeru's room. He can still feel the energy inside him and demands to know exactly what Takeru did. Takeru casually explains he just used some magic water from an ancient dragon as a catalyst and cast a healing spell. Clay is confused and asks how he knows an ancient dragon. Takeru just blurts out that Voldisa's Bee's father, which basically means Bee is also an ancient dragon. Clay sits down and tries to process this bombshell. He's grateful, but he knows no ordinary person could do this, so he asks who Takeru really is. Takeru realizes he might have said way too much, but then again, the god thing never told him to keep it a secret, so he decides to trust his new friend. He tells Clay he's from another world, a reincarnated person. Clay is stunned, thinking it's a joke, but after everything he's seen, the story doesn't even sound that strange anymore. Clay promises to keep the secret, but warns Takeru to be way more careful with his insane powers, because altering someone's body is a huge deal.
Alright, so Takeru decides to check out the display window of a weapon shop because he was dying to buy something. But before he can even go in, a friendly beast woman approaches him and asks if he's interested in something. Takeru straight up asks if her shop sells harvesting scissors. The girl, after saying no, immediately figures out who he is and asks, "Are you that famous gatherer everyone's talking about?" Takeru, not even sure if he's famous, just confirms it. With that, the beast woman introduces herself as Ribble. According to her, her boss, a guy named Grusas, is a legendary blacksmith and can definitely help with the scissor situation. But she warns him up front that he'll have to get something for the boss in return. And with that, she takes him to the chief. On the way, Takeru is just mesmerized watching the dwarves working at the forge, and the whole process enchants him. Ribble, just as hyped, comments that she loves this profession so much that her dream is to forge a sword that will one day be used by a hero. When the two arrive at the boss's room, our protagonist is introduced as the Gatherer, and Grusas acknowledges that apparently he's been getting a lot done in town. Ribble, all excited, just throws the idea out there, saying maybe Takeru could get the Eildra ore they need for a fortune competition. But the dwarf thinks it's super unlikely that a mere gatherer would agree to go to a place as dangerous as the Raihai mine. Meanwhile, Ribble starts arguing with her boss, saying they'll only know if they ask. The dwarf's lack of authority makes Takeru wonder if this guy is really the great blacksmith she was talking about. Then, finally, Grusas loses his patience, raises his voice, and makes it clear that Ribble is always the one coming up with these crazy ideas, completely forgetting that nowadays, the Rayuhai mine has way more than just monsters. It's got demons. Ribble says she heard about that, and that's probably why no one dares to go there anymore. The boss then scolds her, saying she's not fit to be a blacksmith if she doesn't take other people's lives seriously. He appreciates her bringing Takeru, but he can't let an innocent man die because of a selfish wish. Ribble feels the weight of that message and apologizes to Takeru, but to the total surprise of both of them, Takeru accepts the challenge. He promises to bring back that ore from the Rayuhai mine, as long as, if he succeeds, the blacksmiths build him a perfect pair of harvesting scissors. Grusas is floored, asking if the kid didn't hear a word they said. To prove he's not just some nobody, Takeru simply throws the pincer of that giant crab on the table. Right away, Grusas recognizes it belongs to the monster that not even B-rank adventurers can handle, which finally gives our protagonist some credibility. After getting permission, Takeru takes a carriage towards the Rayuhai mine. B, whose stomach is practically touching his back, asks for a bit of crab meat, but unfortunately the stash is all gone. This leaves B in shock, while our protagonist agrees it'd be great to have a few good pieces to eat. In the carriage, a passenger comments she's been hearing some weird stuff about that area, since it seems all the poisonous plants in the Robotus Mountains have just dried up out of nowhere. The guy next to her adds that he also heard about problems in the Forest of White Trees. And Takeru, hearing all this, is just thinking to himself, yikes, I think I'm the one responsible for that mess. Finally, Takeru is dropped off in the region he wanted, right in front of a horse seller. And guess who he spots there? Yep, my friends, the elf that almost starved to death in the other episode. And for just a change, she's completely furious, yelling at the dwarf seller because she'd asked for a purebred white steed capable of flying, but instead the dwarf ordered her a giant white crow. The dwarf explains that in their line of business, when someone says, "I want a horse," it just means, "I want a mount." Unbelievably, the elf apologizes for not understanding correctly, and the dwarf apologizes back, recognizing the communication failure. Since she wants a white steed, maybe she can find one in Vosraul, the land of the dwarves. Hearing this, even while starving, the elf sets off on her adventure. Takeru notices she is heading to the same place he is, but he doesn't go talk to her. After all, they want to enjoy the journey alone, gathering materials they find. And as they travel, they're impressed by the amount of different materials they find in the forest. However, once again, just like in the last expedition, Takeru hears a giant roar. But when he gets closer to the sound, he realizes it's just that same elf again, with her stomach rumbling like a true cataclysm.
Feeling like he's seen this scene before, Takeru patiently gives the poor girl food and water again. Only this time he wasn't going to forgive that awful smell, so he decides to use his clean magic to tidy her up. After all, he doesn't want to ruin the perfect image of elves that he, and you watching this recap, have in your heads. So in return, he's just asking for your like and your hype to show some love for his effort. And also for you to subscribe and hit that bell. This time to help Alex reach 10,000 subscribers. He's trying to level up the channel too, so he's counting on your help. Even more grateful, the elf finally introduces herself as Vel Verida Brocklight, but since Takeru definitely won't remember that, she asks to be called Brocklight. She insists that she is now in his debt, since he saved her twice, and offers to help with whatever he needs. Takeru doesn't show much interest, but Brocklight insists that an elf never fails to repay a debt. Since there's no way out, he accepts her help. And with that, the elf helps gather materials. Except, let's be honest, she is terrible at it. First, she brings him a rock, thinking it's hammer anteater dung. Then she brings a random pile of poop. And to top it all off, she brings him a poisonous mushroom. Takeru starts to think this girl has the same mental age as B, and honestly, it's no wonder those two are getting along so well. That night, as they were setting up camp, Brocklight asked if they should gather firewood. He explained he had magic stones, but the elf said it was important to leave traces of campfires to let other travelers know the area was safe. Taking that into consideration, she goes into the forest and comes back dragging an entire tree trunk. Takeru was about to ask if she really knew what she was doing,
But before he could say a word, she throws the log into the air and slices it into countless pieces with a pair of daggers. And guys, her moves are insane. Takeru, jaw on the floor, checks her equipment status and for the first time sees 2 rank A weapons. Their name is Sylph Yambia, and they're considered treasures of the High Elves, only usable by elves of a rare bloodline. When night fell, Brocklight could hardly believe she was going to eat with them again. During dinner, Takeru says he's going to the Ryuhai mine to get Ildra ore. Brocklight explains she's going to Vosrael to find the white Pegasus of the skies. After tasting the food, the elf realizes she still owes Takeru a lot. Remembering how easily she cut that log like butter, Takeru asks if she wants to be his bodyguard for a while. Brocklight starts imagining if she'll have to act like those royal knights, throwing herself in front of danger. But Takeru just wanted to learn how to chop firewood like that. Showing gratitude to her goddess, she agrees to accompany him as his bodyguard. When it was time to sleep, Brocklight and Bee joined forces and started snoring so loud it sounded like 2 of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse were announcing their arrival. Our protagonist knew the next day would be long. After all, he wasn't going to get a wink of sleep. And sure enough, when morning came, the poor guy had deep, dark circles under his eyes. As the journey continues, they soon reach the bridge leading to the land of the dwarves, where the mine was located. Right after, the 2 arrive in the urban area, and Takeru just wants a decent meal. At a restaurant, they try the house specialty, and Brocklight comments that it's just as delicious as her lizard friend had said. Curious, Takeru asked who this lizard friend is. She explains that the lizard earned the title of Holy Dragon Knight and is now known as the Dragon King of Anno. Coincidence or not even a minute passes before Clay appears at their table. It really is a small world. He immediately starts scolding Takeru for leaving Belkheim without telling him. But Takeru defends himself, saying he told the guild and it was just a quick trip to get Ildra ore. Clay gets upset, saying an F rank shouldn't be accepting missions in such a dangerous place, and he hopes Takeru is getting paid really well for it. Takeru assures him it's a great deal. He's getting a pair of scissors in return, and if all goes well, maybe even a bonus, like a pot. And I honestly cracked up at what he calls a good deal. Clay, on the other hand, doesn't know if Takeru is a complete weirdo or just a really chill guy. But Takeru explains that for a gatherer, a good pair of scissors is more important than any sword. Speaking of which, since Clay needed to repair his spear in Vosrael, he decides to join the group. Brocklight gets all excited and suggests the 2 of them be Takeru's bodyguards. And just like that, my friends, an old lizard and an elf with the mind of a child become our protagonist's protectors. And I ask you, what could possibly go wrong, right? Leaving the restaurant, the group runs into a giant line to enter the Dwarven country. But Clay uses his influence and gets them to cut the line because the Dragon King of Honor has pull.
As they enter, the guards explain that the fortress of Vosrael was built inside a mining hole. Our protagonist is just shocked by the complexity of the underground city. The guard then informs them that the king wishes to see Clay, which clearly doesn't please the lizard. Takeru asks if he's friends with the king, and Clay admits, unfortunately, yes. The guard doesn't get his sadness since Clay is the hero who saved the country from the demon Zengum, the Thunder King. But Clay corrects the story, mentioning that back then the Dwarves made weapons but didn't know how to fight. Because of that, they paid a heavy tribute to the demon. But one day the demon laid eyes on Clay, who was just passing through, and immediately fled in terror, never to return. Because of that, the dwarves built a statue in Clay's honor, which, by the way, looks nothing like him. Up in the throne room, Clay immediately starts arguing with the king about the statue. Takeru introduces himself formally, but the Dwarf King hates formality and tells him to get to the point. Because of this, he hands over the letter from Grusus Pendrasus. The king reads it and asks if Takeru is aware that after an earthquake, the mine became full of demons. He confirms without hesitation. Clay informs them that he and Brolight will be the bodyguards. Seeing this, the king gives his permission, but with a new mission. He orders the group to find out the truth behind the appearance of the demons in the Ryuhai mine. Well, our protagonist already gets that he's not leaving here anytime soon, but he accepts the extra mission. King Zorwadin sends a trusted dwarf to guide them, a local guild receptionist named Zombo. When he opens the mine door, it's total darkness, so Takeru uses his illumination magic and also uses a technique that allows the whole team to see the mine's map. He then suggests they skip the entrance and go straight to the deeper areas. However, before that, they need to deal with giant spiders coming out of the shadows. Clay kills the first one with his spear, and Takeru uses paralysis on the second, allowing Brolite to finish it off easily. Following the path, Takeru senses that the magical element is really dense there. He detects the Ildra in a wall, so he creates his own excavation method. He raises a sort of magic shield and launches fireballs to cause an explosion. And just like magic, he exposes a vein of Ildraite. The guide goes nuts, explaining that this stuff is way better than Ildra. However, not everything goes right, as B alerts Takeru to a new threat. Zombo panics, positive that it's demons. Takeru tells him to chill and says he'll handle this enemy. After all, they are the natural prey for him and B. That said, out of the shadows doesn't come a demon, but another giant crab, which immediately makes the duo's mouths water. And that just got a huge laugh out of me.
Takeru celebrates with B, but the crab attacks him again. Clay yells that it's a rank A monster called a Trango crab. Both he and Brolite get ready to fight, but our bro Takeru, to everyone's surprise, stops them. He just tells B to cover him, activates his buffs, and charges in alone. B uses his sonic attack to stun the beast, and Takeru slams his staff down on it with everything he's got. But the monster is rank A and tanks the hit, knocking Takeru back. The crab tries to crush him, so B uses his skill and freezes the monster's leg. This buys Takeru time to scan its body and find all the weak spots. After that, he summons several ice spears, while B strengthens them even more, surrounding them with wind magic. Takeru announces it's time to end the fight and launches the combined attack straight at the weak spots, freezing the crab in place. Both Zombo and Brolite are left with their jaws on the floor at the scene. But Clay is pissed off, asking why the hell Takeru didn't let his bodyguards help him. Takeru, with all the calm in the world, explains that he didn't want to ruin the edible parts of the crab with their weapons, because the weapons are dirty and that could spoil the meat. Immediately, Clay gets it. Takeru went through this whole fight just because he wanted to, unironically, eat the thing. Even so, Clay reminds Takeru that they are his bodyguards, and that he needs to learn to trust them. Recognizing this, Takeru apologizes. And with all the chaos over, they finally gather the Ildraite Veins from the area. The scene then changes, and they return to King Zorwudin. Takeru reports that they defeated the biggest threat in the mine, but the king, skeptical, wants to know if it's true. In response, Takeru simply pulls the entire frozen carcass of the giant crab from his inventory into the middle of the throne room, causing a mini earthquake. Zorwudin is shocked by the sheer size of the beast and praises Takeru, saying he deserves a reward. But Takeru says he only wants one thing: to keep the crab. After that, Brolite mentions they each got 3 million rave, the local currency, but all Takeru can think about is how he's going to cook that crab. The next day, Brolite receives her reward, a brand new white Pegasus, which he thinks is perfect. Clay gets his spear back, now fully repaired. Brolite says she needs to go home since the Pegasus was for her sister. She thanks Takeru, but he just says they're cool and that they're even since he got a giant crab out of the deal. Clay tells them their carriage has arrived, they say goodbye to Brolite, and she flies away. Back at the Adventurers Guild, Ariana asks if they've formed a party, but Takeru tries to explain it's not really like that, but Clay cuts him off and just says, "Yep, we decided to team up." Ariana gets super excited and runs off to tell the Guildmaster. Takeru's confused about why Clay lied, but the big lizard explains he's decided to keep an eye on him, since he has nowhere else to go. B, of course, is thrilled to have the new team member. Takeru figures it's not a bad idea, and after some discussion, they decide on a team name, the Azure and Black Brigade. With that settled, Takeru goes back to Groos's forge and shows him the Ildraite vein. He asks if it's the material the blacksmith needed, but Groos and Riblin are speechless. Takeru even thinks something is wrong, but then the two of them just burst into tears of joy. Groos says he hasn't seen Ildraite in over 100 years and that the quality is perfect. Riblin thinks they can never repay Takeru since he brought so much ore, but Takeru reminds them he just wants the deal, one pair of scissors. A few days later, we see Takeru and Clay drinking together when a bear man named Wade interrupts them. He says they've received a summons from someone important. Takeru sees the seal on the letter and Clay recognizes it.
It's the crest of House Laselvac, which governs the territory.
Takeru immediately panics, thinking he's in trouble, and even pretends to be sick so he doesn't have to read it. But Clay knows he's lying. Takeru opens the letter and sees it's an invitation for both him and Clay to come to the Lord's manor, so he can reward them for their achievements. Takeru thinks the Lord has ulterior motives and is worried they want to take Bee away from him. In the noble carriage, Takeru gets paranoid, seeing all the people staring at them. Clay explains that being summoned by a lord is every adventurer's dream. They arrive at the mansion and are greeted by a butler named Raymond. But a little girl named Tieris immediately appears, saying she was excited to meet Bee, and then tells Takeru to hand the dragon over. Takeru, obviously, refuses. The girl says dragons are noble creatures, and that he, a commoner, isn't worthy of owning one. Takeru scans her and sees she's the Lord's spoiled daughter. He kneels and asks why she wants Bee. She blurts out, accidentally, that it was Bernard who told her to take Bee. Takeru is like, Bernard? Who the hell is Bernard? And explains to Tieris that he can't give Bee to her because Bee is part of his family. Tieris, who isn't a bad kid, feels guilty and apologizes. Takeru asks why she wanted a dragon, and she says she thought it would help her mother get better. At that moment, her father, Belminant, appears. He apologizes for his daughter and invites Takeru and Clay for tea. Clay asks why he summoned them, and the Lord reveals the real reason. He needs help for his wife Meloidery, who has been bedridden for half a year. He heard the rumors of Takeru's healing powers from when he healed a sick man in the Bospo district and is begging him to save his wife. Tieris only wanted the dragon because she thought a mythical creature could heal her mom. Takeru is worried, but he knows he can't refuse a lord's request. He agrees to help. Belminant takes him to Meloidery's room, which is pitch black. And my friends, the room looks like it hasn't been cleaned in ages, and the woman is just skin and bones. Takeru scans her and sees she has a ton of illnesses, like cataracts, anemia, and kidney disease. But the one that catches his eye is Ivor poisoning. He warns them he can treat the symptoms, but he's never even heard of this poison. He asks the Lord if he trusts him, a random adventurer. Meloidery, with a weak voice, just says she wants to be able to hug her daughter again. Takeru decides to start with her eyes. He slowly uses his healing magic and her vision returns. With that, he uses magic to clean the room and opens the windows. Meloidery cries with joy at seeing the sun again. But Takeru senses something. He takes Belminant to another room and reveals the truth. Meloidery is being poisoned. Someone in the mansion is trying to kill her. Takeru says he can't cure her 100% without an antidote, and Belminant says the Ivor poison is a lost toxin with no cure. But Takeru has an idea. If they find the plant the poison comes from, they can create the antidote. Belminant shows them some ancient documents, and Takeru, with his translation skill, finds the info. An adventurer's diary that found the Ivor flower near a horse-shaped rock by a lake in the village of Asheth in the Vonin region. And Clay says he knows where that is. Before they leave, Takeru places a barrier crystal in Meloidery's room, which will trigger an alarm if anyone with ill intent gets close. Takeru and Clay head for the village. They arrive at a lake that is totally dry and dead. The local villagers don't trust them until Clay flashes his A-rank plaque. Takeru starts asking what happened, and a boy named Ganza collapses from hunger. They're taken to the village, and the residents explain, 10 months ago, the lake's water changed color and the fish died. A merchant named Engach showed up and offered to help. He'd give them 60 barrels of water a month in exchange for a golden flower that only grows in a secret village location. Takeru solves the puzzle immediately. The lake was poisoned, and the so-called golden flower is the Ivor flower. Engach is the villain. He poisoned the lake to force the villagers to harvest the poison for him, probably to sell to the butler. Takeru, pissed off at the situation, decides to clean everything up. And if Takeru is doing a clean sweep of the village, you can do a clean sweep of the buttons down below. If you want Takeru to help these people, then help Alex hit the goal of 10,000 subscribers. It's our fair trade. Smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell because that strengthens the channel more than healing magic. Back to the story, Takeru tells Bee to use his spirit magic, which makes it rain clean water.
He uses his clean magic on the villagers, repairs the entire village, and even pulls food out of his bag for everyone. The village chief, grateful, agrees to take Takeru to the secret spot of the Ivorflower. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Tiaris hears Takeru's alarm go off. She runs to her mother's room and sees the butler Bernard at the door. She asks if he's there to hurt her mother. Bernard tries to play dumb, saying, "I would never," but Tiaris says he triggered the alarm. The butler tries to convince her that Takeru is the villain, but Belminant appears. The Lord, hearing the conversation, decides to test the butler. He tells Raymond, that is, the other butler, to bring the water that Bernard was giving to Meloidery, and orders Bernard to drink it to prove his innocence. Bernard, obviously, panics and refuses. Belminant, seeing the guilt written on his face, throws the cup in the traitor's face, revealing right after that it was just clean water, and yells, "Arrest him!" He was the culprit the whole time. The scene changes, and far away, we see Angosh, the poison merchant, arrive in the village to collect this month's flour. But the villagers, now knowing the truth, refuse to hand it over. At that moment, Angosh calls his henchmen, mentioning that if it won't be the easy way, it'll be the hard way. In other words, he'll take the flour by force if he has to. Parallel to this, we see the village chief lead Takeru to the secret cave. And when they arrive, our protagonist is amazed by what he sees, an entire field of the divine flowers. And at the exact moment Takeru lays his eyes on the antidote's ingredient, today's episode comes to an end. So my friends, how crazy was that? Takeru went from "I just want some scissors" to "I'm going to save a lord and destroy a poison cartel." What did you think of Bernard being the obvious villain? And do you think Takeru will be able to make the antidote in time and kick Angosh's ass? If you want Takeru to take on the evil merchant and save Meloidery for good, you know what to do. Smash that like button and show the hype to strengthen this video. Leave a comment letting me know what you thought of that traitor butler. And of course, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next part.